Just give me an idea what interests you in the topic like this. I mean, there was content strategy. There's customizable CMS. As I said yesterday, sometimes, well, there's only 3 options, and it's like the US elections. You don't like any of the options, but you got to choose one. So I mean, I'm just curious, is there anything in particular that about the topic that interests you, just so I kind of know. It's a workshop, so there'll be a little bit more interaction than just me lecturing the whole time.
I'm a little unclear what this workshop is, honestly. And that's kind of
I will explain it the first few minutes, and if you feel you want to go somewhere else, I will not be insulted. I'll assume it's the topic and not myself. Any other feedback? I mean, how many of you develop websites? How many of you are more on the client and you're using the website, but you're not so much developing it? Okay. Mostly it's worked in the business of developing. I will just explain this in just a little bit, what the concept of content strategy and the customizable CMS. It's the first time I've ever put something of this particular topic together. I've been giving some presentations for a few years, and I have used this as my avatar for some time, and I don't usually say anything about it, and then people get the wrong idea. Obviously, I'm a little older than I was back then. Just first of all, an avatar is good when people look at it and they see it a year later, they remember seeing it before. And I thought, hey, this is one. I mean, how often do you get something like this? So I've got like in forum posts and other places like that I've used this. It was 11 years ago, one of my hobbies is tropical fish. And I used to get really excited and I started writing about it, and then I could get offers to fly all over North America to give talks at different aquarium societies, that sort of thing. And I wrote for one of the national magazines. And I was down in the Amazon back in 2006, January, going up one of the tributaries, investigating what life is like there for the people who live along the area, those who collect the fish, and what's the economic impact, all that sort of thing. And so we went off one day and we did some collecting, and I bagged some fish that I got with a net, and I was proudly holding it up. And it's actually a species I've been very fond of that was the first one I pulled out. So down there, the water, it's called the Rio Negro, which is the Black River. And the water is very dark and tannin, so that's why you get the dark tannin there. And I get people who take it wrong and think I'm holding a bag of urine or something like that. So I want to clarify it. And I felt it was also appropriate because back that time I was going and investigating something new. Nobody really talked about that topic before. So I was going there investigating and trying to look for some new angles and all the reasonings why the tropical fish industry and the rainforest, and is it good or bad, and then coming back and reporting on it. And I thought that's really a lot of the same things I try to do more in technology, because I mean, yeah, we all have to make a living while we're doing our work, but I really like investigating new ideas and trying to come up with new techniques, that sort of a thing, and then sharing those sorts of things. So I just wanted to share, I've never really taken the time to explain the avatar that I've used. I may change it as I get a little bit older and to make sure I get one that people don't misunderstand, but that's the story there. So this is a workshop, and I'm not exactly sure how the timing is going to work, but it's a little more interactive. I'll give you a chance to ask questions, or I'll give a demo or something like that. But I broke this basically into 8 different sections. The intro and demo, demo of what it is that I'm really more driving towards, the motivation for doing this, and then we'll talk a little bit more on the content strategy side about some trends in content strategy, about discovering your client's content strategy and the boundaries that we need to put in places, which is a topic I don't think I've really heard many people talk about, although we all deal with it. And then talk more about the CMS. In this case, it's Joomla. I have some talking points about CMS and how it relates to usability and content strategy. And then talk about the dashboard, the list, and the detailed views that we have that we're all familiar with, but let you think about it more at the certain types and how we can improve upon those for our clients. Streamlining workflows, again, a topic that's not covered very much. I've given a full-length talk on that before, so I'll be giving a few slides from that and a summary of that, and then talking a bit more about customization. And you'll see how it all flows together as I go through the talk. After I finish each of these sections, each one's a little PowerPoint presentation, I'll give a chance for any feedback or questions, or maybe there's something to demo, that sort of a thing. So we'll move on. The title I gave was Content Strategy in the Customizable CMS, but I've also thought I'll take the same slant and offer it in other fields. And I thought a good title there was When Content Strategy Drives the CMS. Because we all use the CMS out of the box quite often, but I believe in customizing it, and customizing it based upon the content strategy of our clients. And so if content strategy should be what's driving our design of the CMS. So this is basically an outline of the pieces I see that are important. On the one side here, you've got the content strategy diagram, which is put out by, there's a book called Content Strategy. And they use this particular diagram. And its substance, which is probably more the content itself. There's structure, the way the pieces are put in the CMS. There's governance, whether things get approved or that sort of a thing. People who make decisions about what gets on the website, they may be different people than who puts it on there. And then there's the workflow, how content gets all the way from creation, all the way through publication, and even taking off expiration. Then the CMS, and I have all the gears there showing that I think it's important for us to have a CMS that's very flexible and customizable. And the third part is the person above, which is you, the person working with the system, and it's your skill level as far as determining the content strategy, and it's your skill level as far as knowing how to customize the CMS that makes everything come to the level of quality that you are delivering to your client. And here's the book, Content Strategy. It's been out 5-6 years, I don't know. And ironically, I'm from Minneapolis area, and Christina Halverson, who writes for A List Apart, and she's been well known as like one of the leaders. Her office is like 10 miles away from mine. And she's been to some of the content strategy user groups. I go to them once in a while in my local area, and I've seen her come there and give a little talk. That's a different niche group than the CMS, but to me it's important to, I see it tied so closely to the CMS, I think it's important to follow what they're doing. So content strategy, there's different ways we can look at it. There's been a picture of an elephant, and you've heard of the people who feel the elephant. It's a rope feeling the tail. It's a big snake or something feeling the nose and the trunk. And then or a big tree feeling the legs, or a wall like feeling the side. You've heard that analogy. And they use that about content strategy, because people who look at content strategy see it in several different ways. But in general, it's the creation, delivery, and governance of useful and usable content. I'm not going to focus on what content is useful and usable. That depends on your client and the specifics there. But as far as the CMS goes, we're more thinking about how does content get created, delivered into the system, and how is it governed as far as people deciding whether or not it should go up and when it should come down, that sort of thing. So here's content strategy. I've already gone over some of the parts. The content components would be the substance and the structure, and the people components is the workflow and the governance. And the question is, in our content strategy, it's unique to each client and each project. I mean, if you're dealing with a website for a pet store versus a national association, they have totally different content strategy. And even two different retailers might have different content strategy depending on what they're trying to accomplish through their website. So we really need to discern that for each client independently and come up with what are the ways the content gets created, gets decided what goes in, gets published and managed throughout its lifetime. And so the question is, do we adjust the strategy to the best CMS we can find? And I think that's how most people are doing it. But I think as the CMS and web industry matures, we're driving more to the point where we should identify that content strategy and be fidel to that, so that we are giving the client just what really works with their strategy and adjusting the CMS to fit into those business rules and the way it should work. So what's important is a CMS that is customizable. And a lot of these places that talk about the grade CMSs, they grade them out of the box. And I think that's the wrong approach. We should be looking at CMSs by how customizable they are, not by what a CMS can do, but what a skilled user of that CMS can do with that CMS. You can grasp, and that's a lot of the emphasis I want to show today, is what we can do using Joomla beyond out of the box to give our clients what it is they want. And again, it's going to depend upon our particular skill set that we have or people in our team have. So it's the skill that we or our people have in determining what the right content strategy is, and it's an art. It's like playing music. You don't just play the right notes. It takes a lot of practice to get it right. And it's the skill we have in working with the CMS to get the best we can out of it, to make it customizable. There's a lot of discussion going on. There's a book called Author Experience that talks about the experience that the authors have when they're using the content management system. Carey McGrain, I'm kind of a follower of hers, and she talks a lot about usability and responsive design, some of that too. But she likes to also has an interest in CMSs and how CMSs can meet the needs of content strategy. You see Jeff Eaton down there. He's a Drupal person following this, and he obviously is also a fan of Carey McGrain. As you can see from his avatar, follows the same kind of he's mimicking that. Typo 3 is a CMS that actually has put some emphasis on the author's experience in the CMS, not just the front end. And I work, I work for myself for my own organizations, Carey Tech Studios. But on the side, I use something called IQ Project, which is a subset. And it focuses more on developing tools and techniques for improving the user experiences for my clients. And I try to publish some of that, if I have some tools, whatever, make them available through this particular site. And so my emphasis here is that when we look at managing content or managing the website, we don't give the users just what we get out of the box. We give a different user experience for content managers than we do for those who develop the site. We give a different user experience for content managers than those who administer the site, such as security issues and things like that. That means we may have a different screen. I don't give my users the exact same screen that I use in order to manage the site. It's extra work, yes, but I try to give them their own user experience, which is appropriate for their content strategy. Okay, so that's when that's my first thing, and I want to now go out and give a little demo of a site that I'm working on. My client said it's okay for me to demo the back end. This will pick up my web browser. Okay, and it's not picking up my PowerPoint right now, but it's since I got out of it. Let me just.
Pretty well whatever you got on your screen.
Okay. It's not right now. So that's why I asked. Do I need to? Maybe I need to do something here. I figured maybe it just wasn't picking up the PowerPoint. Technical difficulties.
So
I have a browser up right now.
it is actually displayed on your screen.
It's displayed on my screen now. Maybe, what was that? Maybe, I'm not sure. I mean, I used to just plug it in with PowerPoint and it just works, right? So I never took the time to figure out. Yeah, maybe. Then well, as long as I can see it too, I guess I could. We could try that. I had to push function.
Yeah, F7.
The Windows key, which?
F7.
Well, let me. Okay. I have a function key and Windows key, so I'm trying to.
Let's go to. I'm not.
Well, here's an F5 maybe, or F4.
How come I'm not getting any cursor here or anything?
Maybe it could be. I was using a mouse.
Oh.
And I unplugged it, and so.
Here, fine.
You got it now?
No.
Okay.
Nada.
You got it now. Okay, just took it.
What I'd like to do is
So let me explain what I want to show. I'm working on a big corporate client that it's non-disclosure, so they just said as long as I don't show branding, I can show the back end. And they had a lot of really they have teams, starting with the US, but they're going to have teams all over the world, like 12 different languages and teams. And each team needs to be able to see only their content and not interfere with the other team. Off of one installation. It's going to run through Amazon Web Services. And then there's, of course, there's different levels of people within the teams. And they want to have content from one team that's shareable for the content for other teams if it's like the US and the UK, which they both can understand English. And they have a whole lot of special things that rules. As I started talking to them, I learned that we needed to incorporate that made this, forced me to really come up and invent a few more techniques for usability. Maybe I just need to, there. Well, almost.
Yeah, it's just, you just have to get over these guys here.
Thank you. I don't work with this often enough, so it's better if you do it, just to go through it. Get it set up. We all set?
Yep.
And now when I get done with this, am I able to bounce back to PowerPoint and come right back? And I should be?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so here we are. This is the back end, and if you notice, I make it very stark on the front end, because why should I throw out all these things, and I'm actually logged in as an administrator right now. I didn't take the time to log in as a staff person, but the idea is they get here and they get to choose which language they want to go to. And so let's say we're working with the US English. Okay, and this is a component that I built for them because they have special, this is like a more financial type of a company, and they had all these different types. It's like, you're not going to find this. You're not going to take articles and make everything an article. That's not going to work. And they had all these different types like funds and all these technical funds, derivatives, and all things that like I learned a lot from what they need. And that's not the important part. Let's say we're going to, here we got bios, which is a list of different people. And if you notice on the list, I've got it, so if I hover over this icon, I'm seeing a lot of information here as far as, maybe you can't see it too well, so let me make this a little bit larger. Hopefully that's better.
Much better.
Okay. If you hover over this, I basically, instead of having many columns for this particular list, I have a little icon. And on that icon is a tooltip that has the information. So instead of them having to click in to see the important information, they can hover over a little looking glass. Expiration. They have, the dates will expire. And right now I've got, if it's nothing's showing, get my mouse here. If nothing's showing like you see over here, that means they haven't set the expiration. And this is a project still in development. But if, like the red one, means it has expired, and you can hover over it and see it expired on October 31st. If it's yellow, it means it's going to expire in the next 30 days. And if it's green, it means it's set and it's got at least 30 days or so on it. And if it's not set, it doesn't have any expiration or any beginning date, so to speak. But instead of putting a whole lot of dates going across, I had just a little icon and using color coding for something like that. They have several different sites. So this content shows in 2 different sites, and you can see which sites it belongs to. There's actually a lot more going on than this that I'm not going to get into quite yet. They have bios, they have contacts, they'll have affiliates, and here's the same sort of thing. Notice also we have these icons here for editing in yellow. Yellow means the content has been edited, but we have not pushed it to production. And so they can do a quick look and they see which items are like, we've made some changes to it, but we haven't committed it out to the live site yet. Trying to see what more. And then there's things like funds here. And you notice the locks, things are locked. It tells that you're familiar with that. Let me go to content items, and they have yet to give me a list of all the different columns they want, so I've got them all going across here. We also have a way you can filter it. And I will be getting it set up so they can click and say, when I want to come here, I'm only going to see this particular site's articles or content, and maybe only a certain type of content as well. Let me click on one of these. This is on my local development right here, so it takes a little bit of time. They had, when I was interviewing them, to find out what their needs were. They said they have a legal department that has to approve items whether or not they, before they go get published. And I thought, well, that's going to be interesting. We've got this one site, one installation that sponsors 12 different countries. And we can't just have one site that's staged like you would in Joomla, and when it's ready, we push it out into production. We have to go item by item. And so I gave it some thought, and I came up with my own technique that for all these items you saw, we have something that they can be staged individually. And so I figured when they come in to edit it, they're going to make edits and they want to show legal department. So by default, every time they edit something and save it, it's only saving in staging only. But if they push this and they save it, all the changes they've got will now get pushed to production. They also could have a link here that tells them whether or not, or gives them a link that they can share with their legal department so they can go ahead and look and see how the content looks before they get approval. Imagine trying to do this if you didn't provide them with these particular links. And also, when they had this particular, they came and they hired me and they told me that they needed to they needed to get approval before individual items can go out to the site. And I tell them, I'm sorry, the CMS doesn't handle that, and natively it doesn't. What kind of an impasse do we get? Do they fire me and go with somebody who wants to put together a Drupal site? Do they have to live with something that is really outside of the bounds of their workflow? And I understand most people probably, they're forced into something like that. And I worked really hard at coming up with a solution, and it took a couple of weeks or so to come up with a reusable solution that I can apply to all of their particular content that gives them this particular option. So the point I'm making there is, by talking to them, I discerned that yes, they had a very real need. And this project's only going to be successful if I could deliver upon that need. And either I had to come up with a solution, or we had to go out and hire somebody who could develop that particular solution. Now that we have that in place, it also means since you have a staged record and a published record, you have to let them know, be able to toggle whether it's going to be published or unpublished, but then we have to know if it's unpublished out on the live version. We have and content types, because I didn't want to have to build out, like say, like 4 or 5 different types. I didn't want to have to build a whole new model view controller for each one. So I basically have a drop down saying, is it an article? Is it a news item? Press release, event, fun document. And if I go with something like an article, notice that, oh, what's that? The category just showed up. Well, the category is only relevant for a particular type. But I don't want them to see that type when they're on a type. I don't want to see the category field or any field that's irrelevant to a type when I select a different type. So one of the techniques is to know which fields to show and which fields to hide given upon a particular context. Quite often that context could be who is the user, what roles and permissions they have when they're working with the CMS, or in this case, it's what type they're viewing. Are they viewing an article? Are they viewing a press release? Or is this actually a resource which could be a document? When we have this, I get another chance. I can say it's going to be a document. And if it's a document, I no longer need that text box. That goes away. And in here, I would be I'd be uploading a file. So I have several different fields that I can select for an item, and they see only those fields that are relevant. And of course, we have publishing. And I also group my fields by things like content, publishing, media would be like images, and they have an SEO tab for when they're concerned about the SEO. And this is some other proprietary thing that they were interested in. They had another rule as I came back to them a second time and showing them what I worked out. And that's very important to always go back and interview them multiple times, because you learn more once they start seeing things coming into place. And they want it whenever you close an item. Well, what happens in Joomla when you close an item? Is it still checked out? No, it's checked in. Do you understand the concept of check in, check out on Joomla? I mean, if something's checked out, nobody else can edit it. They said that they're using a CMS that's an Oracle-based CMS, a really big, humongous proprietary system, and they wanted to go to open source. But they're used to some of the ways they did things. They say if somebody has this article edited and it has not yet been approved, they want that article to remain checked out. And so if I went into this particular article here and I click on it, and now I go out and I close it, notice that it's now checked out for myself. I had to go in and change some of the rules so that the articles, anything they go and edit now it still remains checked out, and the only way to check it in is to click it and to explicitly say, I want to check it in. That's a little change. Joomla allows you to do that because it's customizable, and it was needed for me to do it to work with the client's content strategy. So let's think about this. The client's content strategy is they want to have different types of content, but only certain fields are relevant for that. Check that off. They want legal team to be able to review something before it gets pushed to the production so everybody can see it, and that required not modifying Joomla, but writing some extension that goes ahead and provides that functionality. And they also wanted it that when somebody is touching a file, that it retains their checked out state until they explicitly say, I'm done with it, I will check it in. And Joomla, again, allows us to make changes like that. Not necessarily out of the box, but if you know how to work with Joomla, it's a very customizable CMS. The other thing they wanted was something, I call it My Items, and they had this before. Basically, all the items that I've got checked out as a user shows up here. But hey, we've got all these different types. So I can scroll down, and right now it's a mix of all different types. I had to create a model view controller, if you're familiar with that concept, for all these different types that shows up this screen and pulls in data from all the types that I have checked out and gives a uniform display. And this is where it shows, if it's gold right here, it shows that I not only have it checked out, but I have it ready to be pushed. I have some changes on it that it's not in production. I can check all of the items, I can check certain items, and I have the option of either checking those items in or pushing to production all the items in the whole system, not just per item type that we see off to the side. Again, that was one of their requests that the content management team wanted to be able to do. And I'm in a place where I could say, Joomla doesn't offer that. Or I could say, let me think about it. I think I know how I can make it work. And I go back and I come up and invent a solution for them. And they're much happier about that. I'll be candid. You don't do this for the pet store down the street. But when you have a corporate client, and most of us want to get bigger clients that pay better, you need to give them that extra added value. You need to be able to deliver something that they want, that they're not getting somewhere else. And if you're competing, well, I'm going to talk about this in just a little bit, but if you're competing about WordPress or Weebly or those kind of things, they don't handle this. And if you have the ability to customize, at least, maybe not to the extent I've done, but at least to some extent, you now have added value that your competition does not have. And as we move forward in the future, it's that added value that's going to keep you above the rest of the, you're going to have to be there or else it's going to overtake you because other tools are maybe going to start offering things like that. So that was my demo.
Before you
yes.
turn it off, Randy, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Can you sort by these fields?
Yes. No, you can't sort because it's always sorted by the last time I opened it. So if I open this item and I close it, this item comes to the top. Because these are different, this green area is different. I could have put some code in there that I could up here maybe say sort by this or that. A lot of extra work, and I'm already, when I bid by a project, I give them all the functionality I can, but there's a certain point they aren't asking for it, and you know what, if you're going to have to pay for that, and also it's going to push the timeline out, the cost goes up, and that's not a trade-off we wanted to make.
Right, because you've got it separated too by those green
yes.
categories too, right? And
Yes, I basically go to each content thing. Is the content items, there's what we call it module contents, was next.
Yeah.
All these sorts of things that's in a certain order. And we put all the items that I have checked out. Because one person might be changing some bios who's an author for an article and some module content that's going to go into that article. And maybe this person works for an affiliate and they have to edit that. So they've got all these things and they want to, at one time, click them all and say push to production. And that's the workflow they had, and so you think, how can I invent it? And I'll talk a little bit more about thinking in that perspective of how giving our clients what it is they really want. But this is beyond the box, out of the box. This is beyond what most people are doing. But it's good to start thinking, can we do this? Okay, any other questions?
What happens when you have an upgrade now? Does all your customization, if you upgrade, does it all disappear?
No. Well, my background's in software engineering. And the reason I choose Joomla is because it's object-oriented and uses some very good software engineering practices. Some people want to kind of poo-poo and whatever, this and that. But no, I really think Joomla is, yeah, it's got some things you could say you want to do differently, but it's pretty good. And everything I'm building extends beyond. You heard about Joomla extensions? That word has meaning. You truly are extending the whole platform that Joomla creates. You're not changing. So when they go ahead and make modifications on the core, they're still supporting extensions extending from that. And as long as you know the APIs, whatever, and you understand it, and it took, hey, you don't do this in studying it for a month. It takes a few years studying Joomla, how it works, to be able to get to that point. So obviously, it's only so many people can go to this level, but there's still other levels people can go to. So no, it should be resilient. Now, they ask me, what about 4.0? And I say, well, I can't tell you what 4.0 is going to look like yet. So yes, we may have to make some changes. But we started this recently enough that we were able to say, we're going to make this run on PHP 7. So it's going to be fast in the latest version. And you know, why do anything lower than that? Go with the most we can get now and move forward. But yes, it should be. Once in a while, you'll find when they give a new change, you got to, okay, I got to change a reference or some minor detail. Well, we just have to do that, and you do a little at a time. It's not that problem.
You need to add a parameter to a call or something like that, and then
So, maybe, yeah, maybe. But if Joomla team will let you know, then you just keep up with that sort of a thing. But you can't live in fear the whole time. And I mean, I've had most of my stuff. It's like the only time I've had problems with old code going forward is because maybe some coding style of PHP is a little different now in 7.0. Versus the PHP 5.4, whatever I was coding before. And so it's like, okay, something breaks, and I stumbled upon that while I was putting this presentation together. It's like, oh yeah, I got to fix that now. So, okay, so this is an introduction about content strategy, and what I'm trying to say: get CMS and customize it for the workflow. Any discussion? Any questions? Because this, I can move on to the next topic, but if you have a chance to ask. We want to ask a question. Now is the time.
Can I suggest something?
Yes.
I don't know if people have used this, but maybe it doesn't go as quite as extensive as what you make. But you theme Zoo. They've had it out for a long time. You can customize that. I work with it all the time. I work with it for years and set up things like that.
I work with, and I will go into this later. I work with Component Creator where I'm actually building native components.
Yep.
I have a reason I prefer that. But if you don't go that route, and I'm a coder, so it's easy for me to work with it. If you don't, some of these things like Zoo, when you customize it, will deliver. Yes.
Then you can customize the stuff they've already have built, and it's not that complicated to learn. I mean, you don't really need to know the coding either.
And for people who don't want to go the coding direction, think a CCK sort of a thing where I prefer to go beyond a CCK.
Yes.
But I understand that, and I'm going to be talking about a few other things when we get more about the CMS that actually a Zoo and those kind of things will help enable you to deliver.
You don't realize it at the beginning, but it is surprising at what you can actually do with your stuff.
Sure.
You can build anything with it. You just need to think. Right? And
That's it.
Yeah, plan it out and figure out what it is like what you did, what the customer needs, and then figure out how to build from that.
We have to think outside of our box.
Yeah.
I've never seen it done that way. Well, that doesn't mean it can't be done. Experiment with it and try it. And I'm actually going to be getting to something more thinking from that perspective. So that's the line of thought that I'm going with.
So if you maximize that window.
I'm done. I have like 7 or 8 different PowerPoints. Each one's smaller.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So then I can hang on. I'll save that. Oh, it's trying to tap it. Okay, now I'll.
There it is.
There we go. Okay, so what's the motivation of doing all this sort of thing? Because obviously you look at it and you say, hey, that's a lot of work or whatever. I saw Steve Burge of OS Training give a presentation a few months ago, and he says, well, he was talking about business models in Joomla, and he says, back in the 2005 to 10 or whatever it was, I think he just kind of cut some nice 5-year term like that. People were building templates. That was the really big thing, and people were making a lot of money. And then from 2010 to 2015, extensions were pretty popular. But that curve's kind of dropped. And then now he thinks it's services. And so when I look at that, I'm trying to put this up as far as a changing business model. When Joomla came out 11 years ago, and even before that when it was Mambo, I mean, one of the powerful things about it was that anybody can build their own website. If you just, I started out in the 90s with a notepad, opening it up and writing my HTML code, that sort of a thing. And I actually wrote my own blog before there was this concept called blogs, because I knew how to code. And in my aquarium hobby, I'd go out and visit this city and meet people, and I'd write about it. And so people would actually read my log about something like that. Well, very few people could do that. So I was one of the few on the web doing that sort of thing. But then when the new CMSs like Mambo and early Joomla came out, anyone can do it. And then it became, okay, there's a business around templates. We use this because we don't have to design our websites. We can buy a template and put it in. And then it gets to, well, think of all these extensions. And if you look back at the history back in 2009, Joomla had more extensions than WordPress. And WordPress, John Coonan had told me that WordPress learned a lot of things from Joomla, and they went out in their marketing. So they've got this, now they got how many thousands worth of extensions, and they brag about that sort of a thing. But as the whole CMS thing matures, we're moving more to what people want is more customization and integration and services, or at least that's where the forefront is. Because anyone can, yes, Joomla can get it so anybody can build a website, but you know what? There's something out there called the W's, right? Wix, Weebly, WordPress, that also can say anybody can build their own website. And so why are they going to hire you? Not either because they really, really can't figure it out, which is probably not the case. It's probably because, well, it's just easier to find somebody else to do it than to do it myself. So that's not really a market to pursue. Where the market is these days, and if you also look at extensions and templates, you can go again to some of these places. They put together the look and feel. They provide some functionality. But when you start going with the bigger clients, the ones that have more money and have more interesting projects, what do they want? They want things more customized. They want things integrated with their ERM system or whatever. All these different customer relation management systems, things like that. They want services that you provide. Maybe it's SEO or that sort of a thing. So we need to move beyond the do-it-yourself thought of the website, and if we want to compete against that big W's that are sitting out there. If we try to compete with them, it's really a race to the bottom, and we're trying to see who's going to be the loser. In other words, if we're trying to compete on the anybody can build a website, we're going to be competing on price because there's other people out there who can do the anybody can do it. So I feel like the future of working in Joomla is working more when we can provide that extra level of customization or services. And think of it like McDonald's. People talk about, oh, there's the best. I've heard WordPress people say the best CMS is WordPress because it has more users. McDonald's sells more hamburgers than anybody else, but how many people say McDonald's makes the best hamburger in the world? It's just cheap and convenient. And I'm not saying WordPress is bad, but it's popular because anybody can do it, and so anybody does try to do it. And they've got the marketing behind it, that sort of a thing. But if we want to go the step level, that's where we start seeing the quality. So what you need to do is focus on your particular niche. Focus on a service or an added value that you can provide. And it's fragmented. You can't pick and say, I can do every one of these things. And people who do that usually end up with very few people coming to them. So if your niche is more SEO, it's SEO. Obviously, in my talk here, I'm suggesting being able to customize the CMS and the workflow for your clients, that has a lot of added value. if you compare a WordPress screen and to the way I'm showing some of the screens you can do with Joomla, it's customized, and you go to your client and you show them that, they might go around and turn to some of these other competitors, even if they're using something bigger than WordPress, and ask them, can you do this? And most of them will probably not be able to. And it gives you that competitive advantage. I've made a mistake in the past. A year ago or so, I lost a client. And there's a client that actually caters to, cater to like CEOs that make maybe $500,000 a year, and they basically do remodel their homes and that sort of a thing. And I put together the site for them, a pretty good site. But then I got a call about 2 or 3 years later saying, well, the friend of the owner's wife says she can put together a site in Weebly. And it didn't look too bad. And I couldn't complain. They've already made the decision. And they were willing to retain me to manage their emails, but I don't do emails, so I didn't do that. And I thought, okay, what went wrong? Because it's always good to assess when things don't go right. And I thought, I didn't offer them anything more. I put together their site, and they had a content problem where they couldn't figure out what content to show. I mean, I went out and got some photos for their work and showed it there, but it never changed. And I didn't push them to change. If I had offered a content strategy sort of thing, we're going to figure out who's going to come up with the new content, who's going to go out and get the new content, how's it going to get posted. And I put together that whole system for them so they now had something going. This person doing Weebly would not be able to compete because they are not offering that kind of service that I could offer if I took the time to do something like that. Well, that's not necessarily the niche that I'm going after, but I didn't have any added value for them. And so therefore, since they had a pamphlet website, I lost out to somebody else. And it wasn't that I had a lot of money coming in, so I didn't worry too much about it, but I want to learn from that. If I have a client I really want, I have to go out of my way to give them that added value. And the theme of what I'm talking about here is I think content management is a very strong pain point if it's done poorly for the people who are managing the content. And if you do it really well and they start looking at other tools, the other tools aren't going to compete to something if you've actually tailored to their right content strategy and everything's flowing well. You've got a client for a long, long time. So you need to pick a niche. And the niche that I'm referring to here is content strategy merged with a customizable CMS. But maybe your niche is SEO, or maybe your niche is helping them write the content, or going out and getting you've got the team who can go out and grab the content or the photographs for them. Whatever it is, maybe it's doing their email marketing, but you have to have some added value in order to compete. Otherwise, the do-it-yourselfers, you're just competing and racing to the bottom. There's a book out, I'm a big Seth Godin fan, and he has a book called The Dip, which he basically says, we all get excited at first, and when we have this new plan, we're going up, but then after a while, we go down into this dip where it's a lot of work, and the excitement's worn off. And we look and we see this steep hill to climb to get the expertise we need to get there. You need to decide at that point, is this a competency that I want to invest the time and energy to learn and be good at, or do I go and find another one? The point I want to make is we need to find some niche that we want to climb that hill, because there's not many people at the top of the hill because the hill is steep. So when we talk about CMSs, I roughly put this together, and saying that in the bottom is something that most people can do. It's like an inverted pyramid. It gets wide at the bottom and less and less people at the top. You'll have people who know how to install, say, Joomla or WordPress or something like that, and they can configure it. And a lot of people can do that. Now you go up a step higher, and maybe it's layout overrides. And now you've actually separated yourself from the beginners and anybody can do it sort of a thing. And then there's another level of people who maybe can adjust some existing PHP. They don't really write the whole code, but they can look at it. They can make a change here or there to get it to do what they want. You've got other people who can actually code a solution, and you get the people who are near the top, software engineers, and they get a really challenging one. They can make it work that way. You have to decide. I mean, I'm not saying everybody has to be obviously in code. We can use the Zoo or something like that. But maybe that's the tool you learn, and you learn to be really good at that. And this is that extra value. Question is, how high up do you want to go? The higher up you go, the better clients you're going to get, and the more rare you make yourself, so that more people are going to want to come to you, and the more they're going to pay you for the work that you do. So you need to emphasize your added value when you're pitching to clients. So I ask you, what kind of added value do you offer? So does anybody here feel that you offer added value to your clients besides putting together a website? Go ahead. Yeah, what is it?
Oh, actually building customized stuff in Zoom.
Okay.
Because people always have different things that they want to be able to do inside.
Sure.
And it makes it easier for them to actually change out really good looking content without, like I have everything all set up. And they just pop in the pictures, the text. There will be an area where if they need to download something, it's all set up for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't need to touch anything else, and they can just change it out.
So you're doing a little bit of that, getting it set up. It's easier for them to add their content.
It's a little bit added extra
Sure.
than you would with your normal Joomla website.
Right.
There's a lot more things that you can do with it. So I do that. And first thing I do is just take a client in the back end,
Mhm.
some websites, and show them what I've done, and right away I get the client. So.
Very good idea. That actually ties into one of the things I want to say. You demonstrate some of the work you've done and how you make it simpler.
To show what you're doing.
And because you're
So many people have so much competition out there.
and they don't do what you're doing.
No.
Anybody else that wants to say, I do this added value? Feel free to. Let me ask a question. Let me ask the other question. Do you not offer added value, and you wish you could say you had some added value? It's something to think. Where is that going to be? And you just mentioned how you compete on your proposal, and you show them the back end. That's another thing to think about. How do you what I do when I have my proposals, I actually have screenshots, and I explain a little text. I have like a template that I'll use, and I show it in there if I'm not interfacing with them right away, face to face. But in my proposal, I'll say, I'm going to do this. This is what I do. If you have so many users, we're going to have each user is going to have their own roles. They're going to see the screen differently. They're going to only see the fields they need to. We're customize, whatever, that sort of a thing. And I show some examples of what I do. I even show examples of documentation because when the documentation shows, here's the screenshot of the home page, and here's arrows saying go here and here, whatever.
I actually let them follow along with me, and I tell them what to do and where so they actually are in here looking at it. Like
Mhm.
a test site that they can do that with. And that's when they get really excited when they realize that this isn't going to be complicated at all. And then, of course, on the outside of the site, it looks very good visually as well, which everybody wants their site to look
Yes, I know.
amazing.
Yeah.
Because they have that other component attached to the Zoom. So I've been using them a long time now, and their widget kit will take the content from Zoom and then lay it out in beautiful moving things, and sliders, and all of that.
Yeah.
But I find the organization, the way you organize things in that is easier for people to understand.
Okay.
And you can organize more.
Okay.
Some of your added value you're doing by that as well, Randy, is when you can give them screenshots and those kinds of things and show them how this is going to work, you're establishing that relationship too,
Right.
You're part of your added value saying, hey, I can understand your needs, and I can present this in a way and communicate it in a way that is hopefully going to enhance the relationship for both sides.
That's right. And you have to make that evident to them because you are competing, and you don't want to compete. If you compete in price, you're racing to the bottom. You compete in added value, especially the clients that really matter, they will pay more to get that added value. And it's when you're doing the proposals, when you're meeting them because they consider you a candidate, bring that out. So you need to know what your niches are, where your strengths are, and identify those to the client, letting them know. Let me see. So here's an example of a screenshot I did this is actually a site backend for Warren Signs. They are the largest sign company in St. Louis. They do all the signs at Busch Stadium. And then they wanted to be able to, they had this old site that wasn't working that well, so I fixed them up. But not only that, but I put together a back end. And you see over here we have like the pages, the standalone pages. You can click on it and you go straight to the content. And so this is what I will be demonstrating to some of my clients. Let's say this is the navigation screen that they're going to get to. And there's only one person who manages the website, so I didn't have like only content people and administrative people. But I have it like the galleries. They can manage galleries. On the home page, there's like 3 main sections. They click on it. They edit that particular content. They don't have to think about navigating to components or modules and find the right one. There's that straight hot link there. And they have some other special pages I designed for them. So I would go through and I'd show, here's some documentation that I would show. Here's the home page, and I show like the arrows, and right below I show if you want to edit this, this is how you do it. This is their specialty page. Basically, this is like a casino. And the casino has all these different signs and lights. And what happens if one of them burns out? Well, so what we came up with the idea, and this is kind of usability for both the client and for their client. They have pictures of all the different signs at the casino, and they come up and they look. They have a special hot page that you don't know about, but they know how to go there, and they find it, and they click Start a Service Request. They click on it. It just sends an email to the main sales rep for that particular casino. And in there, it has the title of the sign. So that guy knows, oh, this sign is burning out. They need to get a rep out. We'll get them out there in 24 hours. And so the people who the casino, they just go look at this and, oh, click. And then for managing this, we use the basic thing here. They got the special pages for this particular casino. They get a list of only the items that's for that particular casino, and they get here. Look how simple that edit form is. They know which casino it is. They have a title on this particular image. So if they add more signs, they can create that. If they want to put a description, they could. So when they hover over the sign, it would be a tooltip. And then they upload the image. And that's as easy as it is for them. And when they get done, they come back to, this is what shows up. So I make it as simple as I can for them to help their clients. And I give a demo on something like this. This is unique for them. It's their own content strategy is different than most anybody else's. And you show people that you can come up with inventive ways like that. They may not know, and you may not know yet, how you're going to solve their problems, but they see that you can solve problems like that. And again, this is another example of just a very simple dashboard page that just for somebody, they want to add content, they want to modify services, testimonials, announcements, that sort of a thing. I try to make it as simple as you can. Why throw everything at them? So you go from the navigation, you come to the screens, and I usually have it also, it's pre-filtered. These links actually will pre-filter only to the items relevant. And I use a role-based system. I gave a talk yesterday on role-based. So basically, when you assign a user to different checkboxes, you see only those particular items on the dashboard that's relevant. So one user will see the top one will see the bottom, and it can change. If somebody's on vacation and a new person needs to take over a role, you just click and assign it to that person, and that person will pick up and see some of those boxes when they log into their dashboard. Okay. Any questions? That was on the motivation. I guess we've already discussed that some, but if you have any questions or comments now, this is the time to pipe up. Okay. As I said, I go to some content strategy events periodically to keep up with what's going on. And you can see there's content strategy user groups all over. There's Fargo Moorhead, which is in the North Dakota, Minnesota area, Hamburg, Toronto, and there's even conferences you can go to that talks about these sorts of things. And they have different topics that come up. A couple years ago, this is Karen McGrain. I said I was kind of a fan of hers, and she was speaking at one in South Dakota, so I drove over there to see it. And she's talking about, there's like 3 trends I want to talk about in content strategy these days. And she's talking about multiple channels. That in our content, we think so much only in terms of the web page. And she says, we should be storing our content independent of just the web page. Yes, it goes to the web page, but it's independent. So we have content, and some goes to the website, but there's others might go to social media. Some could go to microsites or blogs, a smart TV. Imagine your in-car system. If you have some content, depending on your client, they might have content that needs to, someday in the future, that content may be able to be read on the little screen in the in the cars, or be audibly read out to someone. We need to make sure our content is truly isolated from the formatting. Don't have all this HTML code all over it. Maybe a bold and italics, but don't have all of that. Make it so that the content actually will live across multiple channels. Also thinking about the CMS, so the CMS now can deliver not just to a web page, but to all these different channels as well. Quite often I hear people think of channels like just, okay, it's Facebook or LinkedIn, and yeah, those are channels, but like I said, there's other things too, other devices. What about a JSON string that needs to go to some other service somewhere else? I don't know, maybe it's an online ad service for employment, and you list your employment in your content management system, but you've now got something set up so the CMS can actually send out, so this other web service is going to now display the employment opportunity they have at that particular company. There's a different format than a web page that you're sending out there. Joomla does allow for us to be able to take its content and send it out in other formats other than web pages. We quite often think of Joomla and a lot of the other tools as only web page builders, but the idea of multiple channels is we should be thinking of content management systems as actually managing content independent of the channel to which that content will now be displayed. Next point is moving away from the blobs to the chunks. I actually wrote an article for the Joomla Community Magazine a couple years ago called Channels, Chunks, and the Death of the Web Page, which ties in all these sorts of things. And the blob approach you see on the side is like, okay, like a Word document. We have this one big screen with all the editing toolbars. And if you wanted to design this ad here as a blob, you would have that one screen off to the side. And you would just basically try to say, okay, I'm going to put in testimonials and have some background image going on there. And I'm going to put the picture over here, and I'm going to put all these things there, and I'm going to make this a certain font size and that a certain color, and all that sort of thing like that. The chunks approach says, I'm going to isolate these particular pieces and put them in their own fields. Now we are storing these things truly as text without formatting. And we have an intermediate stage that when this content needs to go to the web page, that formatting is already applied. This field goes there, and that formatting will apply it for its bold or a certain font size or type, a certain background color, all that sort of thing, piece by piece. Now, if that content will now live on and go to other channels or in other places. In the example I showed you at first, in their content they had, I'm jumping ahead, but they have content that actually showed up not only in one page, but multiple pages. But each time it's in a different page, it would be formatted differently. The blob approach does not work that way. The chunks approach does. We need to think in terms of our content as individual pieces, bring them down to the smallest, an atomic level that really makes sense. So this is the profile in JCM for Sarah Watts. How many chunks do you see in this? And this is the participation thing. So if you were looking at this, if you had to create a form for this, what would you do? Okay, just read through them. I mean, because there's different ways you can answer, but just what items do you see?
There's a picture.
Picture?
There's the bio, there's the URL, and then there's social media links.
Right. And some people would take the social media links and have one for each. They say we're only going to allow Facebook and Twitter or whatever, or you have one that says it's going to be a list of several, and when you want. But yeah, I think that's pretty close. When I worked with this, I actually was doing some content strategy for the JCM for a while, so that's why I was looking at this particular issue. And this is what we came up with when we looked at making the links independent. We only want to honor, currently the current system only has those particular links as individual fields. So we figured, okay, we'll move forward and continue doing something like that. But that's how we break that out.
You also could break up in the first paragraph as a separate piece, depending on how you want to display the information.
You get very close to what I'm going to get to. Here is the front page, where we take the bio, and we started looking at this as we're thinking about a redesign of the JCM, and we realized, this doesn't work too well. David Hurley is an, Ruth Cheesley is CEO, Sarah Watts is the president. We just had an election. She didn't win. No, but truncation fails. I've seen examples of truncation. When you say we're going to give only so many letters and the ... it can be obscene or offensive or nonsensical. Truncation is not the best way. Sometimes you have to do it, I understand, but if you're really concerned about your public facing, you need to do something better than that. In this case, we probably shouldn't even have put, or the original system should not even have put those extra little text in there. So how do we answer that? Well, we need to create two fields for content. One is the short content, one is the long content. And if this is going to be displayed in more than two places, we will now need to create 3 or 4, how many, based upon that situation. The story was about TV Guide back in the 70s, was writing up summaries of all the different TV shows. And if you notice today, when you look at your TV screen, what's coming up, go to the hotel room and see the different things scrolling, and they have little short summaries. Those are the same summaries that TV Guide wrote 30, 40 years ago. They were smart enough not to write just one big one, but for each one, they wrote different lengths. So now when you're looking across for a short summary or a medium-sized summary or whatever, they were smart enough and did that sort of thing. Not all companies have done that, but now their company lives on media that was not in existence when they wrote that content, because they wrote it independent of the format. They wrote different sizes as well. So there's an art to doing chunking. It's identifying it. It's not that tough. We came up with 5 pretty fast. But then also realizing, do we want to have 2 versions or 3 versions? So that was very astute to be able to pick up that we would probably want 2 versions of something like that. And then maybe 3, because we may be using this somewhere else. You want a 1 paragraph as opposed to the lengthier one. We could say the same things about images. I don't know if you Flipboard, but that's Flipboard, something like for tablets, that sort of a thing. And depending if you're looking at it, portrait or landscape, it'll actually readjust the content and the images, because for every image, they have a different size image cropped, and they know how to apply it at the same time. That's pretty sophisticated, and we probably aren't going to do that with Joomla unless you have a really complex project. But thinking about that, the project I just showed, I demoed first, they actually were savvy enough about that, and they came up with, they take their images and they actually run it through a processor. So every image has like its regular name and it's underscore 80 by 120, 360 by 480 or whatever. So they have different sizes that are used at different places. And so the CMS is smart enough to say, I'll take that name and whatever page I want to put it in, we will mix those two together, and now we're pulling up the correct image. So there's ways of doing it. They were also savvy enough on their articles that they had the headline, a teaser, an abstract, and body for every single piece of item, because they use those on different pages, whether it's a lead-in or a list or the full detailed article itself. Then so I talked about channels, I talked about chunks. The other concept is the death of the web page, and it kind of tied into that already. We think of the web page, what we build our web pages, but really, if we're going the next step level, we're really managing content. The web page, yes, our system does manage web pages. It has menu items, it has module positions with modules assigned based upon the menu items, and if you work with Joomla, you get all that sort of thing. But the content should be separate from it. And when we're running a system like this for our clients, especially the bigger they are, if we try to keep it separate so that their content is not tied to the formatting, we can deliver for different channels and in different types of pages. And so we need to rethink the web page. I remember when I first put my first Joomla site together, probably like 6 years ago, and I had worked on some CMSs before, but they were web page builder type sites. And I struggled for over a week trying to figure out Joomla, because I didn't understand that when I put together a web page, I'm really like, there's two parts to it. There's the content, then there's the structure of the different pages, like the menu items and the module positions and modules, and how that actually takes the content, and there's multiple levels. It's more sophisticated than a web page builder, but I think it's actually better, and it allows us to move forward better for the needs of what we're going to encounter. So here's content going. If you look at a page like this, you probably realize there's separate content for the banner that rotates, for this little content here, for the list of items, and the little footer sort of things. No one's designing this page at once. They designed the template for it, and the content comes separately. And then when we have it that way, now we are able to send this at different channels. The same content, different channels, whether it's a web page or an RSS feed or a JSON string or going to Facebook or Flipboard or any of those sort of places. As long as we have our content isolated from the web page, we are much better off. So that's multiple channels. We want to chunk the content to avoid the blob. And we want to manage content, not just the web page. And when I work with clients, I quite often have to tell them, you know, this system isn't, you aren't building web pages, you're managing content. Joomla is a true content management system in that sense that it allows you to isolate the content from the whole web page. And I try to stress that, and that's some added value if they go with a Joomla site. But you have to keep reminding them once in a while, we aren't building a page because this content can live on multiple pages. And then for the more technical ones, they might have their own web department. I'll point something like this out. It uses the model view controller of how reuses all this code here, but then when I do some custom work for you, you've got just the right pieces there. And I point out that, listen, when I have the view, if you might notice, if you look at the code level, it says like, I'm trying to remember this, view.html.php. And it used to also have a view.pdf.php, which means that particular layout would be putting out HTML, puts out PDF, and we have the ability, Joomla is flexible enough, customizable enough, that it actually has a mechanism in there for us just to take the same system we've got, but just add an extra file that's going to, instead of putting it out as HTML, it puts it out as PDF, or it puts it out as RSS, or puts it out as a JSON string, or whatever interface we want. Maybe it goes to our toaster and engraves the text on toast, something like that. Okay. So those are the 3 trends in content strategy today. Again, this is the chance to throw out any comments before I move on to the next one. And this is what I'd like to talk about next, is the discovery phase. Okay. Here we go. We're trying to discover what our client's content strategy is. And it's one of the very important parts is the interview. How many of you interview your clients as far as how the front end of the site's going to look? How many of you interview your clients as far as how they're going to manage the content? Good, good. That's very important. How many of you come back and interview the client about how it manages content more than once? Okay, that's good. The interview is a very important part. If sometimes if you're dealing with the owner of a pet shop and you're going to list what puppies they have for sale, it's probably the same person. But when you get to little bigger companies, you are now interviewing different people. You need to realize it's you've got 2 different interviews to do. My last biggest client, I go there and I'm talking for 2 days with their development team and learning more about their project and what they want. But we saved the 3rd day so I could actually meet with the content management team to find out their rules and how things work. And that was a very important one. And I keep telling myself this project, what's going to make me stand out more in this project, is focusing on the needs of those people who are managing their content and giving them what they want. Like the examples I showed you, it's like, going above and beyond. It's a different line of questions than you normally give. What you probably want to ask is about all the content, who creates, who decides this, who decides when it expires, who publishes this, how does it get done, and how often does these changes happen? And then that's for all these different actions, such as how does it, who, how often about it being created, or entering it into the system, or reviewing and approving if that's important for them, publishing it, actually pushing, you're going to push and make it go live to the site, updating it as it needs to be updated, who checks on what needs to be updated and how often, and then expiring, taking that information down. Maybe they don't have a policy on things like expiration, but you need to know that. You need to cover basically all of these, and not just comprehensive for the site, this set of questions. If they have 5 different types of sites, they have testimonials. If they have products that they're listing, if they have a blog, that's 3 things right there, and they may have 3 different sets of answers for each of those 3. So for each type, you need to think about who does things, how it gets done, and how often. And as you ask them that, they don't have to, you're not asking them how the system should work for them. You ask them how it works in their organization as far as people moving that information around. And then you come up with the best solution. I don't have a slide for it, but I also want to say that most people don't use a content management system for creating their content when it's like a lengthy article. They use a Word document. I think that's very acceptable because the CMS is made for publishing content. And when you go to a Word document, you can do a whole lot more than you can in the CMS as far as people adding comments that need to be changed, this or that, or whatever. I don't have a problem with people using Word because I think CMS should focus on what it does well and let the content be created elsewhere. And sometimes the content comes from a database from somewhere else, like a product inventory database. So that's just one thing I wanted to throw out. And then the interviews. You might have, the whole agile approach, if you've heard about that, is you develop something, you test it, and you get feedback. And you do that 1 time, you do it 2 times, you do it 3 times. You don't just interview them initially and find out what it is that's going to work. I mean, if it's a small project, you might get away with that, but you're better off coming back. So what I will do is I'll find out what they want, and I'll come back later and I'll show them what I put together. And now, if I would have done it at first, I've been like, a mile or 2 apart. Now I'm only 50 feet apart the second time. But they still point out, oh, I forgot to tell you about this. Or that's not quite what I was referring to. And so the shorter you make these things, you do a bit of work, you show them, you get feedback, you don't go off in the wrong tangent. You're addressing their answers, and they appreciate the fact that you're showing them the time. So constantly do this, develop a little bit, test it out, make sure it works the way you think, and then show them and get their feedback, and then go on iteration after iteration until you finally are, everybody's satisfied that you're there where you need to go. Boundaries. This is something we don't talk about as much. I at least am conscious of it, but I don't always, how often you articulate it. I think in web projects, I kind of can break it down at least to 3 high levels. There's the site integrator, myself, and most of you, I assume. There's the client's administrator, person who might be, maybe they're installing extensions, maybe they're checking security issues, rogue attacks, or updating the system. Maybe they're doing backups. Whatever administrators, maybe they're adding users. And then you get the content creators. The question is, where are the boundaries in here? And in some organizations, you've got even more than client admins and content creators. You've got different intermediates or different sibling type of roles. So you've got to find out what these boundaries are. It's not always that easy. I just kind of quickly put this together to get the person like us who are developing the site. Then you've got the super admin, site structure, page modules. I think those are kind of higher level things, as far as, well, the whole, I don't really want content people messing around with like the site structures. I don't even care for them messing around with the page modules. Sometimes it has to be done. Then you get an admin there who might be still at the upper level, or maybe they're just there to do things like user management or actually creating new pages, and sometimes you need to create a new page on the navigation. And then you get the content people. And this is very rough, and you got different types of content, so this is an ideal little look. It can be more complicated than that. Question is, how much do you do on any one project versus the client? And obviously it's how much the client is capable of doing and how much the client wants to do for their comfort level. Ideally, I'd like to make it this way, that they only work with content. They don't do anything more. But yeah, sometimes they need to create pages. And I understand, I get that. I like it when they create a content, the page is automatically generated for them. And I can do that many times. There are going to be needs that they may have a user manager. Maybe they want to outsource that to me. You know? So there's no one clear answer. But the one thing I like to do is push things as far down as they can for the content people, especially if they use the system only once in a great while, or if they're not necessarily technical people. They're managing content because they know the content, but they don't always know the system. I don't want them to do complex things. They should be able to know how to get into a screen and add content. But should I make them learn how to add a module and all these settings of a module, to understand what access levels are in the module, to understand where I set the expiration dates and things like that? Maybe some of them you have to. But like I say, if they're infrequent or not highly technical, you're asking an awful lot for them. And they either need to have somebody on their staff who's going to be maintaining those sorts of details, or they're going to need to hire me to do something like that, or somebody on my staff to do something like that. So where do you draw the line? And it's not just a simple line. I mean, obviously they may have multiple people on staff, so you've got their persons might be doing things like the 301 redirects, or monitoring security, or ACL management, or they might be outsourcing some of that to me. I have to first of all be concerned about how much am I going to be managing after I launch the site and hand it off to them, and after we've gone through that grace period where I'm kind of helping them out. But I also, if they have multiple people, I want them to be able to figure out how much their people are going to do and who does what, that sort of thing, figuring out those particular roles. I like to keep it, like I say, as simple as possible. So here's an example. Again, I showed you that Warren Sign site. And in here, if you look at almost every single one of these things, aside from the menus, everything links to content. They are not managing modules. It's only one person managing the site too. But they are, if they do need to create a new menu item in the utility menu, the main menu, the footer menu, okay, he can do it, or he can call me up. And if he does it once a year, he's probably going to call me up anyway. It's like, fine, that's part of my maintenance for you. I can do that quickly. But if he needs to do it himself, he's got the ability. Everything else you click on, you're going to content, you manage content, and I've put together the structure that will now display that content in the way they want to see it. Here's a county that actually, this is the way I set them up. So they have all these different departments. And the department, if they click on, say, district court, they're going to see a list of articles that's relative to district court, and that will all show up in their sidebar menu that people can navigate to. If they also, the context in the header, district court, and all these other ones have one, they can click that, and they can change the phone number or the email address or add a new person. But that's only content. And the structure is all there to put those pages together to pull the right content into those particular pages. And then the home page has different sections, and if they want to, I want to update a special announcement or whatever, it's just content. I'm not asking them to create a module. It's just content, and that module then pulls in that content, and they know how to go find it. I make their life as simple as I can. In this particular case, the person was, I felt it was very important, and sometimes I think that they can handle a lot more administrative things than they want to. I'll ask them how much they want. This was a restaurant that I worked with, and they gave me these 4 menus, said, here, we need to get these menus posted on our site. Notice that the menus, there's somewhat similarities, but they look pretty different, don't they? That's because each one, they just took a Word document and started typing it in, probably the same person, but a different day. One time they decided to go with red font for the title, and obviously they're all different sizes. The problem when you give people the blob is, or give them access to create their own modules and put them here and there, is they get inconsistency. If you take pride in putting together a consistent system, try to find a way that they don't manage, first of all, the toolbar. Give them just the bold and italics and linking and things like that. And then as far as the page structures, set up the page structures for them and try to keep the content people out of actually moving this module around and that module around. Obviously, some clients want to be able to do that. But to me, it's like, hire me and I will fix it for you. But we have a consistent look and feel. And I think most clients do not need to be working with modules. As a matter of fact, that first site I showed that's pretty complex, I gave them a module content thing, and they don't even touch modules. They add the module content, and when they're in an article, they have one of those little buttons in the bottom they can click, and it puts that little curly bracket thing in. It will take a module that's already pre-designed for whether it's a list of bios, and it can be a list like this, it could be cards. They get to choose all those things on that content item, and it will insert it in there, formatted the way we've agreed the unified format's going to be. And when you're working with 12 teams across the world, that's important that they don't have their hands on modifying the format. And so here's an example. I took their menus and I basically designed a menu. So all they do now is they have the chunks. And this is back before I even heard about the whole chunk idea. It's basically, you have your entree, you have your title, you have a description, you've got your prices on one side, you've got the sub prices down below, and they can go ahead and add the stuff, and it's all uniformly formatted, and each item is categorized under entrees or sandwiches or desserts or whatever. That's easy for them, and they really loved it, and it's a lot better than giving them that blob of a page. And the point I'm making is try to keep them working on content, and if they know how to handle the formatting, okay, but most of them don't. Try to keep them out of the formatting, even like modules. So you got to figure out the boundaries. Push it down as low as you can as far as how much the content people do. And if they have some intelligent people that are going to do things like they're going to install new installations, extensions, or managing the menus, make sure they're well trained and well documented. So we need to identify the task in the organizations. And one way we do that is we look at the web page, we look at what content is there, what content is likely to change. And if it changes, we say, well, who's the person that's collecting the new content? Who's the person that's managing it and reviewing it? Who's the person that's publishing it? How does it get done? That's all those questions I mentioned in the interview thing. So identifying the different tasks that somebody has is looking at the web page, all the different web pages, and look at the different types of content and ask yourself that question. And you'll find a lot of it overlapping, but you want to be able to identify and account for every piece, because by the time you finish the site, you have to have all the pieces accounted for. We also look at sites, the interactive features, whether it's a registration, whether it's a shopping cart, or a call to action. Interesting thing I was going to say, I've worked with some different shopping carts, and I'm big into roles, setting up different roles for people to do things. They can only do what they're allowed to do. I had a very hard time finding a shopping cart that allowed me to extract the role of somebody who manages fulfillment. In other words, and I had a client who needed that. They were selling their own product themselves. They wanted to list the price, they wanted to list which products, but then they wanted to have somebody in another company who does the fulfillment, making the mugs, making the t-shirts, making the hats, whatever. And it wasn't Donald Trump. But he wanted somebody who would be able to fulfill that sort of thing. But that's all they should get to. Most of the shopping, I'm thinking with these shopping carts, they don't even offer that ability to extract that, a different role like that. They expect you got to be an admin. And if you're going to be able to fulfill, you're going to be able to set the prices and maybe look at customer order information and payments. Don't want that. Anyway, so looking at things like this, like a shopping cart, there's a lot of pieces going on in that. And there's different players. There could be one person, it could be multiple people. And hopefully we can find extensions that actually allow us to say different roles, different user groups have access to this part and not to that part. And if you can't, sometimes you build your own and make it work the way you want. So you look at the site, also some of the administrative and maintenance things. Who's going to do the upgrades, the backups, the user management, asset management like images, and that's also retiring the images. Who's managing SEO? Who's going to monitor the pages that people are hitting from bad links coming in and issue the 301 redirects? Or creating new pages and modules if they ever need to be done. Who's doing that? So that's part when we start thinking of the different tasks and the different roles. And then we have to take the time to set up the roles. And I put these two figures here because Joomla has the ability to set up roles, but it also takes more of the art on the left-hand side to know how to do it fairly well. I mean, you got to practice, start, and doing it. And setting up different user groups and permissions. I gave a talk yesterday talking more about that, and I don't think I have the time to go into detail on that now, but this is the part about discovering the client's content strategy. Once we know what pieces are in play of content, what their normal organization's responsibilities are, who's responsible for creating, publishing, reviewing, all that sort of thing, and how frequently it happens, now we're able to go ahead and work with the CMS. Okay. A few talking points. What is good user experience like? How can we improve upon it? And this is a point we kind of touched on earlier, is don't start with the CMS limitations of the developer's perspective. We should be thinking from the user's perspective, what it is that they, what do they want out of the system? There's a tension, I think. But we have the developer who develops like the CMS and the back-end screen, and then we have the content managers who want to get their content in. And they both have different perspectives. And the content management user experience, which one is going to win? And when we look at the back ends on all of these, I don't care, Joomla and the other ones, I think quite often they are more developer-driven. An example I wanted to give is front-end editing of modules, which I think shows a developer mentality that really, well, I will show you a much better way. When it first came out a couple of years ago, you would see that little button if you had the ability to edit a module, and you'd click on it. Now you get to log into the back end. When you log into the back end, you get to edit the module. So you're editing the modules from the front end, and all we're really doing is giving you a link to the back end. Okay, that was easy for somebody to develop a solution to make it work. It's kind of like front-end editing. I don't have to hunt for it. I just click here, and I'm going to be taken to the screen after I log in again. But they improved upon it. So when you click on it, you don't go to the back end. You just get this full screen on the front end. What's wrong with this? If anybody knows, tell me. I have. Problem is, there's 7 fields on there. If you change one of those values, you can make that module go away. And if you have front-end editing, how are you going to get back to change that setting? What if you change the expiration date or the publishing date? What if you change the access level? What if you change the language to something that you don't have access to? And what if you don't even have multiple languages? There's different items in there that you could change. What if you actually toggled it so it's not published anymore? And then you save it. It's gone. How are you going to edit it? This was not that well. I mean, it was an improvement from what we had. But no one who was designing for the users would design a screen like this. They designed from the developers and imposing upon the user's perspective. What we really need to do is go from the user's perspective and say, how should it look? And then build it. I'm going to say that again because that's really important. Instead of taking the easiest thing that the developers can do and imposing it upon the content managers, we should be looking at what the content managers want, what the workflow is, what their content strategy tends to be, and impose that. Design the way it should work. We should build our storyboards the way it should work for them, and then build a system that matches that. An example, I gave this talk a few years ago at J and Beyond about front-end editing of modules. This is before they even had it. And I said, this is the way it should work. And I actually built a prototype that worked this way. I said, here's you got the manager of a restaurant, And she wants to change this little box up in the corner that says things like announcements. So maybe it's Memorial Day coming up, and she wants to say, we're going to be closed Memorial Day, here's the hours. And I don't want to go to the back end, and I want to make it simple. So you click it, and this is what she gets. You can go and edit that text and save your changes. That's all. That's all she needs. So that's all I'm going to give her. And then we have, maybe she's got somebody else here who has some other responsibilities, and they have their bands playing, and this person's in charge of the music coming and playing in their lounge on Fridays and Saturdays. And this person needs to go in and make some changes to the module, such as, do I want to link the titles, or do I want to show the intro text and things? Just a few fields, nothing more, and it's whatever the fields that's appropriate for that particular company. And you click and save the changes, and they get saved. And then you can have access levels, like I was kind of getting at, where you actually, or permissions, where you could say, for each user group, they can do this, another one does that. And so one user will see this screen, or this little pop-up, and one will see that. Wouldn't that be ideal? Isn't that what we would want when we're going to help people edit the front end? Only show them the fields that's appropriate for that person's role for that particular client? That's how we would design it if we're just taking out our napkins and sketching out the way it should work. That's taking the perspective of the content managers and forcing and actually designing the way it should look. And so we're taking something like this. Like I said, I did a prototype, and this was back in the 2.5, I think, back then. But I was able to make it to prove it. This is an actual website. They actually did have a need for that, and I built one in 3.0 that's basically uses, I didn't get it quite as elaborate as you see there, but basically uses a rock box, pop-up dialog box, and so when they click on it, they get to see only the fields that they want. And it really wasn't all that tough to build. I knew I could build it, so I said to somebody, I'll give a talk at your Joomla day for it, and a week before I went ahead and wrote it, and it can be done. And I feel that's a big improvement when we look at what the users want. So what we need to do is come up with that storyboard and say, what is it that's perfect that they want? We might not be able to deliver it, especially if it depends on your technical abilities or your resources you have available, but start from that and try to give them what it is that works for their needs. I've already talked a bit about the interview. You've got to do a question. Yeah. What? I just want to look at it? I mean, I just got a clip art sort of thing and storyboards. Story has nothing to do with web development, but anything more? Oh, okay. The interview, you've got to, if you want to be user-centered, you have to find out what the content managers want. And you have to interview, as I said before, and interview several times. So the case for adding, and some of this is a repeat. This is like taken from another talk I'm mixing in here. There are two types of models. There's a do-it-yourself, and there's the client professional. The client is now hiring you as a professional because they're expecting you to deliver something extra, added value. Maybe it's your time that they don't want to invest, but usually it's the added value. They expect more from you. If it's a do-it-yourselfer, they're probably not going to take the time to design and craft a user experience for themselves. They're just going to use it out of the box because they took the time to learn it. Now, the client-based projects are quite different from do-it-yourself projects. The do-it-yourself is going to take the same form for both and the same person for creating the site as they are for managing the content. But what I propose is that the site developer can use the full, say, Joomla form, and the business user then sees just what they need for managing content. There's a separation there. They have a totally different experience because they have a different person. Why make them use the same screens that we did for developing the site? Because they're not developing it. And as I said before, I'm trying to get them away from things like the modules. Point 5, if you can improve the user experience, that adds value more than you might think. This is the diagram I mimicked from somewhere else that shows that if this is the importance of features. As a project is simple, features is kind of important in a little bit more than the usability in a CMS. But as we go farther to the right, we get more team-based or large and complex projects, or there's non-technical users or infrequent users. The importance of usability rises much more sharply than flexibility. this project I've got with 12 different teams, they've got to make it easy for their users. And of course, they need some functionality in there as well. But to them, that's a very important part. And if it's not usable, they're going to say this was a crappy project that was done or something, and they're not going to like it, and they're going to complain, and they may end up changing to something else a year or two later. Usability is very important as we go for the bigger clients. And that has been a study actually shown that that's really, when they get down to it, that means so much more to the clients than the feature list. They can live without some of the features. The other one is you need to think about your professional value. How much are you adding? Are you adding the common one that anybody else can do? Are you up to the professional level that you are now offering that extra services that the client's going to want to hire you because it's more than just anybody else can do? You actually have it. Or if you really worked at something for a long time, maybe invested a couple of years in a service or a niche or something, and now you are considered an expert. The opportunity to come up and speak at Joomla days and Joomla events like this help give people more credibility as being an expert. So if you think you want to pursue that, there's plenty of opportunities in the Joomla community to be known as a Joomla expert. And if you seem like leading a Joomla user group or things like that, clients, that can be pointed out to clients, and you're more apt to get hired if you're taking roles like that. And of course, you still have to invest the time and push up that slope to develop the skills. The other thing is this pyramid changes through time. I mean, 5 years ago, maybe the pyramid was only, this is common, and this is professional, and this is expert. If it goes straight across, now some things that were common, some things that were professional are now common. Anybody can do. Anybody can build a web page now. Like 10 years ago, it wasn't that easy. And as we go 3 years from now, things that might be a professional level now might get pretty easy with some of the tools, and you have to constantly be improving your particular skills. You need to understand how to override templates. I work with custom components, and I'm going to just roll on through some of these things. So how? The thing is, we want to break the tension in the CMS from feature-rich and simplicity. As things there's more features in it, they're usually harder to use. If you have a car that can do, with all these dials, usually the dials are there because it can do an awful lot of things, whether it's radio or GPS or whatever. If you want something drop-dead simple like a one-button item, how many things can it do? And so the CMS, we're in this tension. I know a lot of the core development is thinking, how can we make Joomla back-end easier? And they're trying to think of just one user interface. And by making it easier, they're going to take out functionality. It's a natural tension. How do we get from complex to simple? And the argument I make is we actually give a different, we give a simple back end for the client and a more complex one for the admin who is actually building the site or maintaining the site. And that's how we break the tension between complexity and simplicity. They can both coexist, especially since we have two different users. It's time to stop accepting the CMS user experience as it comes out of the box. You see here we've got like WordPress and Drupal and Joomla, and they've got a lot of different complexity there. If I show these different websites, this is the back end, and this is the front end examples of each of these websites. If I show you the front end and I ask you what CMS ran it, you wouldn't know. But if I show you the back end, you know. Because why? Because they all look alike. We put so much energy into focusing the user experience on those people coming to visit our sites because there's a commercial reason or it's just that's the way it is. But no one's thinking about how do we customize and tailor the back end for our particular users. So they all, each have their own identity, and that's the way it is. A Joomla site back end looks like this, but a Joomla front end can look like any of those. What would it be like if we had the back end can look like anything we want? And really, it can because the back end is built the same way, 95% the same way as the front end. We don't have to settle for this exact same thing. It's easier for us to, but if we have important clients, we can deliver a customized back end like we deliver a customized front end. We need to think from the user's perspective and impose that upon the back end experience that we give to our content managers, what it is that really matters to them, just like we do for the front end of their sites. The CMS user experience is only partially solved by the CMS. It is primarily solved by you, the site developer. That's because you know your client better than anybody else. You're the one able to identify their content strategy. And the CMS is a one toolbox. And the importance of the CMS is being flexible, being customizable, so you can actually deliver and solve that usability problem based upon what you see and your skills and what the client needs. So the importance is we need a customizable CMS. And I believe Joomla is very customizable. You may have to dig in it a little bit, learn more about if you know how to do layout overrides. On the front end, you can do the same thing on the back end. You don't have to show all those fields. Think of the contact form we've got with different tabs and different fields. You know, why are you showing them all these fields when they only need to respond to maybe they only want first name and an address, or first name and an email address, and they don't have anything else, or several other fields? You can remove that from overriding the layout file. So just as we can use templates in the model view controller and overrides and extensible and modules and ACL for segmentation of users on the front end, we can do the same on the back end in order to give us a totally different look and feel and different, meeting the needs of different roles. And again, I want to say iterate, iterate, iterate. You aren't going to get it right the first time. If you're working with a client to give them what they want, you need to keep asking them questions. Have the conversation, have the interview, not just for the front end, but for the people who work at the back end, and have it regularly, depending on the size of the staff and how big the project is. Remember, invest in discovery. And the goal is that we want to be driven by the user's perspective as we work with the CMS. And the challenge is that we need to do the extra work in order to give them what they want. It's not going to come out of the box. This is my diagram here. Is you've got the person, the site integrator, has to do all this extra work to deliver what our content managers use so they can deliver the content to their end client. It's actually a different extra layer in there. That's the challenge. Okay. So there's a site developer and business user. We should offer a different user experience. We should have the interviews. You need to invest in your own career, and what level do you want to go to? It's an art in doing all this, and you need to think from the user's perspective and how you customize the CMS. Okay, time-wise, I'm going to look at. Okay. I'll jump over to, this is a fairly quick one. I'll do this one. And in Joomla and probably most CMSs, we really have three different types of screens. We have the dashboard, the navigation screen for starting a task. We have to manage a list. And we have to create and edit different items. And it all follows pretty much that same pattern. So the navigation dashboard, I've talked about this to quite an extent that I think we need to separate that to make it simpler for our users and give them just what they need when they start their task. The list view, we can improve upon this by filtering it. So when you click the links, maybe you're seeing only the items they want. Don't make them have to figure out how to do all the different filterings and those sorts of things. And I also have discovered as I'm working on my last project that you can add extra features. If they have too much information they want in the link, just add it as a tooltip over an icon. Or just think of new ways. You can override these layout files. And think again from the user's perspective. What do they want to see when they see a list of items? And is it worth putting the time in to go ahead and customize it the way they want? And you start coming up with your own solutions. It's pretty easy to put them in there for project after project. And a big thing I want to point out is when you have your edit forms, figure out what fields they really need to see and hide the rest. This is HickShop, which in almost any e-commerce shop is going to be, especially when it's powerful, going to have more fields than you'll ever need. And so whatever your client needs, show them, and the other ones don't show them. Don't make them guess as far as what fields they need to fill out and which ones have no applicability at all. Plus, you can, if you want, you can override the tool tips, and you can change the order. You can change the tabs. Maybe the first tab is only the required fields, and the other tabs then are categorized. Instead of making people go from this tab to that tab to whatever, put all the important ones in the first tab and have it so they fill them out sequentially. You can move the order around. There's so much you can do with the edit forms that you know, it's like you can on the front end. So consider that. I want to show one. I want to at least cover a little bit on this one, and then we'll wrap up because we're getting close to the end. This is about streamlining workflows. And this is identifying the workflow that people have. And I mentioned starting with a storyboard. I came up with a whole talk, and it talks about get rid of anything that's not needed. Tuck away options that are advanced so they don't see them right away, but they know where they can click over here and get them. Reduce the number of steps it takes to do something. Get the sequence of steps so they're obvious and intuitive. Don't make them jump around from tab to tab to tab. Task-centric. I'll touch on that just a little bit. Segment users so each user can have their own unique experience if it's applicable. Task-specific extensions, and always provide instructions and help. So nothing is not needed. Where's Waldo? You know, I mean, it's hard to find Waldo because you have so much clutter. Yet, when you do something only like 3 things like this, you make them more prominent, you can find Waldo among these. And when we look at the starting point we give people on the CMS, it's like we get used to it. We know where things are at because we're familiar with it. But somebody for the first time, where do I start? That's a lot easier for me to use if I'm starting from the user's perspective. And then I got this whole list of items under articles or contacts or whatever. Why not get it when they click the link that we take them only to pre-filtered? There's ways of doing that. I've got some tools, and I probably don't have the time to go into all that, but there's ways you can do it so they only see the items that's relevant for them. There's a way you can set the URLs up. I've got a little tool that actually sets that up. But let me continue on about the theme here. And then you've got the toolbars. And this is for articles. We've got the first page, the second tab, the next tab. Look at all this content you've got. And you get to the point thinking, where's Waldo? Where's the fields that I want? And if we take each of the tabs and we only put in the fields that's relevant for that particular client, look at how much easier that is for somebody to use. They're only concerned about start, publish date, and the meta description. Why do we give them all these other fields there? Same thing with the contact form. So many fields on that first tab. And you can reduce it to something like that for most people. And once you've got it built like that, you can reuse it again. I showed the HickShop before. And then our toolbar. Why do you show people all that? I mean, I get something like that, and I can't find the toolbar button I want. It's like, where's Waldo? So I've come, if we can have just a single particular bar that has only the things we want. I do like the new tiny MCE editor, which does something more drop downs instead of this full. And you can actually set up the JCE to show only ones you want. Nothing that's not needed. You want the sequence of steps obvious, so you always. This is an example. Let me see if I'm. Hang on. You got from there starting out of the box. It's like you get a note to go to content. You got to go to article managers and add a new article. Whereas here on the start page, you just got one button to push, create a new article. That's one step instead of 3. You don't have to remember where the breadcrumbs are to how to get there. Same thing when you want to filter. If you get the links so it pre-filters, you want your sequence of steps in your form to be just the way they're going to enter these fields in this order. Just design the form to go that way. Segment users into different user groups so we can give them different user experiences. And this is an example of a county where I have like one. Here's the auditor looks this one, and every department had their own screen like that. And when they go to the pages, they see only the pages for the auditor's department. And the JCE, when they upload PDFs or whatever, it takes it to a directory that's specific for that department. And they don't interfere with some other department. They can't accidentally delete somebody else's content. And the sheriff's has more. And the webmaster has different ones, but they each have a different user experience. What I'd like to quickly show is the task-specific extensions instead of generic solutions. And this would be like building a component creator as opposed to, say, Zoo or K2, which if you go, let me show an example. I'm not sure, maybe Zoo solves some of these things, but task-specific things is like these aren't things you can get out of the box. You got to build them specially for events, restaurant menus, specialized inventory, testimonials, that sort of thing. And this is, I put together a place for a pet store where they can list their puppies they have for sale. And so this is the page, and what they do is they start out their home thing for puppies. They come here, and they click on, they see the list of puppies when they click on it. They click on the one they want, and they go and edit their information. 1, 2, 3, just like that. So well, I want to see what it takes to do in K2. So to K2, I go components. You have to go to K2 and K9, and the pet store owner says, K2, shouldn't it be K9? I'm selling puppies, right? So, but they have to remember to do those 3 things. And then they come here and they have to go to set the category. And then they find the right item. And then they come in here and they have to go to this tab. And then they go to that tab. And they have to know the ones in yellow you avoid. They have to know all that. So that's 7 steps instead of 3 steps. And they have to know which ones to avoid. So by building a customized solution for them, and then maybe Zoo can do that. I do it with Component Creator.
They do, but
But the goal is to get us.
Whittle it down, yes. I want to know how to just start doing a site dashboard like the way you have, where you just
I can tell you after, if you want to talk later, we can do that. But getting down to 3 steps like that, and when I use the tool as Component Creator, I go ahead and create my fields, and I say, what type of field it is, a date field or whatever, and boom, I generate. It's free if you want to use just one database table for your component, and then it generates an installable file. I put it in. There it is. I have to override my layout file so it looks the way I want it, but I go in the back end and I can edit these items, and it's got all the fields the way I want. And then I usually add my client-specific information to it. And also the first example I demoed, there's like 20 different database tables we have. Well, it's like $350 for a year if you want to be able to use the tool to build these bigger components. But anybody can go ahead and try it. And I use this because it's built on native Joomla. It truly extends Joomla. It doesn't use another extension to manage the content. Okay, so I'm going to just, we're really done with time, so I just want to say, focus on your users from the user's perspective, identify their content strategy, and try to tailor the user experience in managing their content through the CMS to meet their needs. You will be providing added value, and it's the way to compete in today's market. Joomla is a very configurable tool, very extensible. Extension is its middle name, you can almost say. It's the right CMS. You're in the right CMS. You just have to learn how to use it right and put value and effort into giving your content managers that tailored response. I think that's the wave of the future. It's certainly going to make you much more marketable and more profitable in the future. Thank you for your time.